On December 23rd, the boxing world will witness a card stacked with talent in the Day of Reckoning, the boxing event of the year. It doesn't have a top-of-the-bill main event of Joshua vs Wilder, but hopefully it sets up a fight for next year if it is to happen. However, could there be a banana peel in the making? In today's video, I'll be diving into the details of every fight on this incredible card and give you my breakdown for how each could go down. So on that note, let's get right into it. The main event will be former unified heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua as he takes on a determined Swede in Otto Wallin, who he actually fought back in his amateur days. For Joshua, he has been on the mend ever since his 2 losses to Usyk, teaming up with Derek James, getting a 12-round decision over Franklin and a devastating knockout over Helenius. However, still looked very tentative at times as he tries to get his mojo back. For this fight versus Wallin, he's teamed up with UK-based trainer Ben Davidson, Tyson Fury's former trainer of all people. But maybe this link-up is what Joshua needs. But the constant change of trainers is a concern for me, as he goes in with another crafty southpaw who will be fancying his chances to cause a huge upset in Saudi Arabia. In terms of the fight itself, Joshua has obviously been in with one of the best southpaws in the sport in Alexander Usyk, and he did struggle with his movement and boxing IQ. However, that experience you would hope would make him feel much more confident going in against the southpaw in Wallin, who primarily uses a much more fundamental and slower approach in comparison. For Otto Wallin, he employs a strategic, calculated boxing style utilising more lateral movement and defensive awareness to disrupt his opponents, mainly keeping behind the jab, waiting for opportunities. While he's not known for his one-punch knockouts, Wallin showcases effective combination punching and catching his competitors with sneaky counterpunches. While we've also seen his resilience and determination in his effort versus Tyson Fury, showing incredible physical and mental toughness to give Tyson Fury one of his toughest fights to date. The Swede is coming off a win against former cruiserweight world champion Gaziev, and I suspect he will primarily be using that probing jab to wait to counter Joshua coming into range with his left hand. However, I do also see an opportunity for Joshua in these moments to counter him with his own right hand. For Joshua, I expect him to employ a more cautious approach early, reminiscent of his strategy versus Robert Helenius recently, taking a much more disciplined approach while looking to counter with the right hand whenever Otto Wallin opens himself up. As I mentioned, he can probe out that right hand a bit too often with no intention at times, which could give Joshua the opportunity to land a big right hand himself, similar to what he did in his first world title win versus Martin. While he'll also need to be careful of Otto doing the same himself. I do suspect Joshua will maybe be more the aggressor, looking to close off the ring, as Wallin does like to get behind his jab and use good lateral movement, but in no way near the level of Usyk as I just discussed. Overall though, I feel Joshua does have the superior punching power, which should be the difference. The question for me is who is more willing to take the chances on who will win this fight. For Joshua, it's a must-win if he wishes to secure that future clash with Deontay Wilder, while Otto Wallin will see this as the perfect opportunity to become one of the big guns in the heavyweight division. Overall, this is a fight that could end in drama for either man. Next up, we have another huge heavyweight clash, as former heavyweight champions Deontay Wilder and Joseph Parker will collide in a fight which could have implications for the 2024 clash with Anthony Joshua. Wilder is coming off a long layoff, October 2022, in a knockout win over Robert Helenius. But this time he faces a resurgent and active Joseph Parker, who has already fought 3 times already in 2023 after his loss to Joe Joyce, and of course will be looking to get a huge upset win. And I do think this could be a much tougher contest than some are expecting. The Bronze Bomber is obviously known for his destructive right hand, and must overcome Parker's more tactical approach, who tends to use a lot of movement, utilising his agility and quick footwork, and could very well see him boxing from the outside to prevent Wilder from getting set to unleash his powerful right hand. While we've also seen with Parker's stablemate in Tyson Fury that taking the more aggressive approach be just as effective neutralising any of Wilder's work. However, due to Parker's style, I'd probably lean more towards the tactics Tyson Fury used in his first fight.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, what Tyson's done is he's jabbed at Wilder's glove, which has occupied Wilder's glove. And the more you keep this right hand occupied, the safer it's going to be for you, because he's having to think defensive-minded. And his hand positioning, you know, Wilder will throw his right hand from anywhere between his nipple and his hip. David will know when you're going to throw a powerful right hand, you're not going to throw it from above your head. The main point here is Tyson taking away the distance from Wilder.
Maintaining the gap?
Maintaining the gap, keeping the distance, making him fall short, which then leads and forces, while Tyson's got space behind him, he can take the distance away. When he's in a position where he can't, Wilder falls in and smothers his own work because he's trying to punch through the target and close that gap, and he's starting to force things and be able to avoid that right hand when forced to go that way.
Yes.
And he done that effectively, and as we see throughout the fight, he was taking the distance away and keeping Wilder turning, which was very important.
Now obviously Wilder has been working under Malik Scott, and we have started to see him utilise his lead hand a lot more in training and even in his fight versus Fury, which did create problems for the Gypsy King, in particular the jab to the body. However, I get the point of this will no doubt be to get leverage to set up his money punch, and Wilder often likes to post out his jab or use a sticky jab before firing off the right. While he'll also sometimes peel away the guard with the lead hand to create that opening for the right, and Parker will need to watch out for these techniques from Wilder. While another opportunity for me is definitely the left hook. Parker has always kept this in a lower position throughout his career, while he's also been caught out many times bending to his right to avoid the 1-2, only for the follow-up left hand to catch him. But with such a long layoff and Wilder not getting any younger, you have to maybe worry that he could potentially gas out in the later rounds, as we have seen him do in other fights. Parker is very good at throwing combinations together which can do some serious damage, as seen in his last two fights. And I wouldn't be surprised if his quick burst combinations really start to take their toll on Wilder. However, he'll need to be careful when he does this, as it could open himself up to one of Wilder's counter rights. With that being the case, I do feel Deontay needs to stay alert defensively, using his long reach to his advantage. And personally, I think it will be better for him to keep at range and look to control the distance with his jab, and of course wait for the opportunity to strike. Overall, I feel most are expecting the inevitable to happen, but if Parker can manage to take him into the later rounds and avoid getting hit with the right hand, he could just make this a difficult night. The esteemed light heavyweight champion Dmitry Bivol will be in action after almost a year out the ring, with most of the other top light heavyweights tied up with other fights. British light heavyweight Lyndon Arthur will step in the ring to see if he can figure out the puzzle of Bivol. For Dmitry, he is coming into this fight after two dominant performances against two Mexicans in Canelo Alvarez and Zurdo Ramirez, and most will be expecting him to put on another incredible display of skill and dominance before a potential matchup with Peter Biev in 2024. However, he must try to get the job done on December 23rd against a tricky fighter in his own right. Lyndon, in my opinion, has one of the best jabs in the light heavyweight division, just behind the likes of Bivol himself. For the most part, Arthur likes to box from the outside, firing sharp up jabs which can be extremely annoying for your opponent and disrupt their rhythm, as opponents try to get past it. And for me, I felt it's always been very reminiscent of the way Larry Holmes would use his jab. But in terms of Lyndon's jab, it also helps create a gateway for him to set up his own combinations as opponents try to get past it, including a right uppercut. And Dmitry will need to be careful of this when coming into range. But I very much suspect Bivol will be more of the aggressor in this fight, very much trying to stand his ground and waiting for the opportunities to use his brilliant in and out movement and 1-2s, which can at times be very difficult to time with your own punches due to his swift movement, and as we've seen all too often, opponents get frustrated throwing out unnecessary punches only to get countered themselves once again. Another issue with Linden, if you look back at the second yard fight for example, once you close the distance on him and stop him from being able to utilise his jab, he can be neutralised in that respect. And due to the lower lead hand, he often gets caught with overhand rights as well, which I'm sure Dmitry will be looking to land at some point. However, Linden is also capable at fighting on the inside and smothering your work, but Bivol is very difficult to get in that situation due to his movement and outboxing style. And as much as I do believe Linden has good qualities, I just believe Bivol is on another level, and I do very much expect him to win this fight. I do believe Linden can create some issues early for him, as he may struggle to get past that jab. However, Bivol's movement and his ability to create openings through the guard will land on Linden eventually. We also have another potential heavyweight cracker as Daniel Dubois and Jarrell Miller will collide. Dubois is coming off a TKO loss to Alexander Usyk, which sparked some controversy over the low blow incident. However, despite the loss, he put on a valiant effort against arguably one of the best pound for pound. He'll be up against a very different fighter in Jarrell Miller, who has a proven track record of using PEDs, and I really do question if someone like him should be involved in the first place. But from an entertainment perspective, the trash talking and confidence draws eyes, and he'll be very much looking to establish himself with a big win over the young contender in Dubois since his comeback in 2022. Now, regardless what we all might think of Miller, he's still going to fight. Big Baby Miller has tended to use his size to his advantage, and he does look to close off the ring using his jab before going into that high guard so he can get on the inside and try to bully you in there, making you open up with your own shots before he counters you. And personally, I think if you're Daniel Dubois, you need to avoid getting drawn into this battle with him. Dubois takes a much more rigid fundamental approach, mainly keeping behind his jab, looking to set up his big right hand, while Daniel is also very handy with his body punches, which can cause some damage. And I feel this may be a good tactic to use, jabbing Miller to the body or throwing the right hand as he comes into range. While I also feel youth is very much on his side, and he will have much more opportunities to land on someone like Miller in this encounter compared to Usyk. However, where I worry for him is when the going gets tough, and if he is drawn into a battle with Miller in close exchanges, I could see him get hurt, as Miller will no doubt want to stop Dubois from getting off these rangy punches. I feel if Dubois can outbox him, he should be able to get victory. But if Miller does manage to close the distance and make Daniel fight his fight and hurt him, I could see him crumble under the pressure once again, and this is something Miller will be wanting to achieve. We also have a clash in the cruiserweight division on December 23rd, as Australia's boxing star Jai Opetaia will take on Britain's Ellis Zorro. However, there are issues around the fight being for the IBF world title, because Zorro is not in their rankings, and could even be stripped. Regardless, I do hope this fight will take place. But in terms of the fight itself, Opetaia is for me one of the most exciting fighters out there right now. A southpaw who possesses explosive power, while he also has terrific movement, who actually really reminds me of Dmitry Bivol at times. Opetaia, on the other hand, is just a lot more powerful. Stylistically, I think this fight will really suit him. Zorro is a much slower paced fighter who likes to stick behind his jab and set up counter punches as you come into range. He's also a terrific body puncher and possesses knockout power. However, for me, he really needs his opponent to be planted in front of him to get off any of his best work, and I think he'll be shocked and overwhelmed by the movement and angles of Opetaia, as he simply does not fight at that rhythm. In my opinion, Zorro will need to hurt him early to stand any chance in this fight, while I think getting off his body punches will also be necessary, while he'll need to be ready to throw that right hand when Opetaia uses the shift technique to close the distance. But not to discredit Zorro too much, I think he's a great fighter who has decent qualities at British level. But as we know, in boxing, there are levels to this, and he'll need to have the performance of a lifetime to win this one. I expect Opetaia will be wanting to prove a point to the IBF and the other cruiserweights in the division in this fight, and I will be intrigued to see how he gets on. We also have the Croatian powerhouse heavyweight Filip Hrgovic, who will once again be looking to assert his dominance as the IBF #1 challenger looks to finally get his mandatory shot at the title versus the winner of Usyk vs Fury. However, after 2 tough, maybe unconvincing performances against Zhang and McKean, he'll need to prove a point on December 23rd. This will be against Australian heavyweight Mark Mori, who is a very well-travelled heavyweight, having fought all over the world with only 2 defeats. One being against former heavyweight champion David Haye all the way back in 2016. Nevertheless, I do believe this is a huge mismatch, and there simply could have been better matchmaking against this guy, who's about to potentially get a title shot next. And I very much suspect Hrgovic to try set him up with a big right hand, and for me, he needs a decisive and early knockout. Next up, we have Makhmadov versus Kabayel. Could very well be the least known on the card. But once again, both will no doubt be looking to make a statement to get themselves bigger fights in the future. Makhmadov is a rising star in the heavyweight division, as the Canadian-based Russian could face his toughest test against the European champion in Kabayel from Germany, who will be looking to last a lot longer than Makhmadov's last opponent, 70 seconds. For Kabayel, he is a common stablemate as Joshua's sparring partner, and even defeated Derek Chisora a few years back, and is maybe a lot more skilled than some of the other contenders on this card. But a recurring theme on this card, there is levels to this game, and once again I expect the size and the power of the Russian is going to be a problem in my opinion. Personally, I do expect him to chase down Kabayel to take him out early, and if Kabayel can survive the early assault, maybe he can make it a difficult night for the Russian, but it's hard to see. Finally, we have the Cuban Thunder in the ring with Frank Sanchez as he takes on New Zealand's Junior Fa. For Sanchez, he's your typical outboxer Cuban, but without question also has power. The Cuban used to train alongside Canelo Alvarez for many years, but is still looking for that big fight opportunity despite beating a big opponent in Efe Ajagba. But maybe due to his slippery style and movement is why so many are avoiding him. For Junior Fa, he is very much rebuilding himself after a shock defeat to Lucas Brown in Australia last year, while his fight with Joseph Parker was a bit of a stinker, where he mainly looks to slow the pace of the fight by smothering your work at any given chance. And for me, Junior Fa will need to do what Lucas Brown did to him in his last fight, catch Sanchez with a beautifully timed shot to hurt or knock him out early. The Cuban's movement is just too good in my opinion, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get a good performance from him, as he, like many on this card, need to put on a big performance if they wish to get bigger fights in the future. Overall, I'm really looking forward to this event. I think obviously there could be more competitive fights on the card, but the star appeal of the top heavyweights and of course Dmitry Bivol are a big draw to most. And I think most of us are going into this expecting the favourites to win each of these fights convincingly. But I also believe there could be a huge upset in there somewhere in this card. This is boxing after all, especially in heavyweight boxing. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on the card. What fight are you most looking forward to watch? And which fight do you think there is most likely to be an upset on the cards? This has been Jamie from Boxing Life. Enjoy all the fights when they come, guys. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.